I adjusted the mic at exactly 4:03 p.m., blinked into the lights and scanned the rows. Their seats were still empty, row 2 marked with their names. I smiled anyway and went on with the speech like it didn't matter. I talked about service hours, budgets, the promotion I never thought I'd get at 70. People clapped politely. I nodded like it was enough. But my hand kept shaking, so I pressed it against my skirt until it stopped. Susan from HR hugged me afterward. "They must be proud," she said, not knowing. I just said, "They're probably watching from home." That was a lie. I already knew the game was on. I sat through the whole dinner. Chicken was dry, rolls were cold. No one asked who was missing. I stayed through dessert, said thank you, even laughed once or twice. But every time someone said family, I looked away. Why pretend they had a good reason? If you can celebrate a team, why can't you show up for the person who paid your rent last year? If it's family, why does it always depend on my gas money, my time? When I got home, I replayed the live stream. Around minute 12, I saw it on the top corner of my phone screen. A text from Brenda popped up: "Kickoff snacks ready." Wings are insane. That stung more than the silence. I hated how much I tried to defend them in my head. Maybe the babysitter canceled. Maybe they were sick. I hated how my first instinct was to cover for them, even to strangers. Like I owed them my dignity. I forwarded the video to myself and closed the laptop. No edits. Just the raw link. You'd think after all those years helping them, they'd show up for 1 hour. I left the auditorium and sat in my car, still wearing the corsage I bought for myself. At 9:42 a.m. the next day, my iCloud synced while I was making coffee. The video was short, 30 seconds, but I watched the whole thing twice. Brenda was filming. You could hear the TV in the background, the Super Bowl intro blasting. My son leaned back with a beer and said, "She's probably still thanking the janitor," and they all laughed. Brenda added cheers to the new VP of Irrelevant. I didn't move. Just stood there holding the spoon I'd been stirring with, letting it drip on the counter. I opened my laptop, deleted my own copy of the speech from last night, the one I'd recorded just in case someone asked. No one had. I saved the new video to a thumb drive, labeled it sb-truth.mov in plain letters. No drama, no notes. If you knew your mom had a promotion, why film that? Why post it to shared cloud space? If it's just a joke, why did it land like a knife? My neighbor Carla dropped by to return a mixing bowl. She saw my face and asked, "Rough morning?" I said, "No sleep. Just catching up." She nodded, handed me the bowl and said, "Well, they don't know what they've got." I nodded. I didn't say what I was thinking, that maybe I'd made it too easy for them to forget. Maybe I was too available, too willing to drive to pay to excuse. I sent a simple text. "Did you watch the speech?" No reply. Not that day, not the next. I hated the way I reread it, like the tone would change. I hated the pause before I hit send, like I was asking permission to matter. Maybe I was too easy on them, made myself too convenient. I thought maybe they'd call. They didn't. At 11:06 a.m. on Tuesday, my phone lit up. His name, no emoji, just Zach. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. He sounded upbeat. "Hey, Mom. Sorry, we missed it. Figured it'd be online anyway." I gripped the edge of the countertop until my knuckles whitened. "It was streamed," I said flatly. He kept going. "Yeah, we thought we'd catch the replay. Anyway, it was just a work thing, right? A work thing." That's what he called my promotion. If I'd skipped his promotion speech, would I get a pass, I asked. If I missed Brenda's baby shower, would that be just a scheduling thing? He sighed, like I was exhausting. "It wasn't that serious, Mom. You always take things too far." I didn't argue. I just reached for a sticky note and wrote down the date, time, and his exact words. Then I added it to a file I'd started in a plain notebook. What they said versus what they did. My friend Denise called right after. She works the early shift at the pharmacy. Still want to grab lunch Friday? She asked. I almost said no, but I needed something normal. Yeah, that sounds good. She said, You don't sound good. I said I'm just tired, because the truth is, I was embarrassed. Not just that they missed it, but that I kept hoping they'd realize, kept hoping someone would say, we messed up. I hated how much space it took in my head. If I had missed his promotion, they'd have called it a betrayal. The next morning, I got a text I wasn't meant to see. At 2:41 p.m. on Thursday, my phone buzzed while I was rinsing dishes. I wiped my hands on the towel and glanced at the screen. It was a group text. Zach's name was there along with Brenda's. It said, Just ride it out. She always forgives. No hi, Mom, no context, just that. I sat down on the kitchen chair and didn't move for 10 full minutes. The sink kept running. Then I screenshot the message. No cropping, no edits. I opened my laptop and emailed it to myself with the subject line, pattern. I didn't reply. I didn't say a word. If I had sent something like that about them, how would they react if I said, just ignore them, they'll come around? Would I still be invited to dinner? Mrs. Carmichael from next door came by later to return my mail. Got one of your catalogs again, she said, holding up the garden flyer. They're always sending junk, huh? I just nodded. She looked at me for a second, then said, You okay? I told her I was tired. That part was true. I hated how predictable I must have seemed to them. I hated that I'd taught them that, how to wait me out. I hated the way I stayed quiet. That wasn't the first time he expected me to forget. It was just the first time he put it in writing. That night, I pulled out my drawer of saved papers just to see what was really mine. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled the folder out by its frayed tab. The condo title was still there, unchanged, my name printed clean at the top. I flipped the pages once then again and stopped when I saw my husband's signature from 1989. I ran my thumb over it like it might move. They'd asked me more than once to add them just in case of what aging, dying, being inconvenient. If it was really about safety, why did it always come up after money talks? If they weren't planning ahead, why were they so eager to plan around me? I sat on the floor with the papers spread out, feeling slow and foolish. I hated how long I'd delayed this. I hated that I kept telling myself it would be awkward. I hated the way I stayed quiet. The next morning, I drove to the Maricopa County Recorder's office and took a number. The chairs were hard. The air smelled like toner. Linda the notary looked at the document and then at me. You're allowed to decide, she said, plain as that. I nodded and signed where she pointed. I added a transfer on death to my niece. No speeches, no explanations, just ink and initials. Linda stamped the page and slid it back. This stays simple, she said. I folded the receipt into the folder and held it against my chest for a second longer than necessary. I thought about the dinners I'd paid for the favors I'd done, the times I'd been told I was overreacting. I thought about how easy it would be to call and explain how familiar that urge felt. You don't get to plan my funeral while I'm still buying the groceries. I closed the folder, locked the drawer, and stood up. I didn't warn them. I just booked a one-way ticket and set a timer on the lights. I left the key on the counter with a yellow post-it. All I wrote was, I'm not furniture. Don't plan around me, no explanation, no forwarding address. I slid my suitcase into the lift at 7:42 a.m. and told the driver, Airport, please. Their message about brunch had come 2 days earlier. No apology, no mention of the promotion. Just brunch. Sunday. Your place like nothing had happened. Like I'd still set the table, buy the fruit, make the coffee. At Sky Harbor's Terminal 4 lounge, I stirred a black coffee with a wooden stick and stared out at the planes. Then I opened my phone and deleted the brunch message. It felt petty for half a second. Then it felt like air. I used to tell myself they were busy. that it was enough to be needed, not wanted. That showing up was my job, not theirs. I hated the way I stayed quiet. I hated how much I wanted them to miss me. I hated that I gave them chance after chance to prove me wrong. "You still flying solo?" the woman next to me asked. Her name was Paula, mid-60s, bold lipstick. She didn't wait for a deep answer. "Good for you," she said, sipping from a white paper cup. If I had skipped their baby shower without a word, would they have let it slide? If I'd locked them out of their own birthday brunch, would it be not that serious? I used to set the table and hope they'd show up. They didn't, so I left it bare. By the time they arrived, the eggs would have been cold anyway. I landed in Flagstaff just before sunset. Cold air, quiet phone. I woke up to 3 texts at 6:18 a.m. The first, "Where are you?" The second, 2 minutes later, "Are you okay?" The third came after that. "We didn't mean it like that." I read the first 2 and left the third. Unopened, the little blue dot sitting there like a dare. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the phone without typing. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I'd imagined this moment differently, me shaking, rushing to reassure them. Instead, I made coffee and watched the steam rise slow and ordinary. If they were worried, why did it take a locked door? If it was never that serious, why did it suddenly need fixing? Now I forwarded the screenshots to my lawyer and then texted my cousin Renee my new address. Only those 2. No group chat, no explanations. Renee replied right away, "I've got you." 1 line, enough. They called twice before noon. I didn't answer. I hated how familiar the pull felt, the urge to smooth it over to say I understood. I hated that part of myself for still wanting peace more than truth. I hated the way I stayed quiet. They always call when they feel the ground shift, never when they're standing on me. Around noon, my lawyer Mark called to confirm receipt. "Do not engage alone," he said. That was it. No lecture. Just a boundary that felt like a hand on my back. I typed a single reply to Zach and deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, I sent 1 line, "I'll talk with someone present." No emojis. No softness. The phone stayed quiet for an hour after that. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Long enough for me to think about apologizing for leaving, for causing stress, for making it awkward. Long enough to remember how often I'd done that before. I agreed to 1 call, but only with someone listening, at 3:05 p.m. On Tuesday. We were wrapping up the HOA meeting in the rec room when my phone lit up. Zach calling. I caught Susan's eye and raised a brow. "Mind if I take this on speaker?" She nodded already, packing her notes. I tapped answer and set the phone on the table. "Mom? This is ridiculous," Zach said. "You ghosted us for a promotion. You missed brunch. You left a key like you're some guest." I didn't interrupt. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. This is family, remember." Susan quietly pulled a pen back out. "If we can't depend on you, what are we even doing here?" He kept going. "You always do this. You make us feel guilty and then disappear like some martyr." My voice shook for the first word. "Zach." I swallowed. Kept going. "You told her to record over my speech. That was a joke. And the group text, she always forgives." A pause. I looked at Susan. She was writing. "Look," he said finally, "I just think it's cruel to go changing things behind our backs. That condo was always the plan." "Whose plan?" Silence. "Funny how clear people get when they think you're alone." "I just want to talk without this weird energy," he muttered. "You're on speaker." "Susan's here." He hung up. I sat still. My hand was damp against the table. I didn't speak. Susan finally said, "He knew what he was saying." She flipped the page over. "Want me to note this for legal, witnessed coercive language regarding property assumption?" I nodded. "Thank you." I hated how good it felt to be believed. I hated that it took a witness for me to stand firm. I hated the way I stayed quiet. After the meeting, I asked Susan if she knew a good real estate agent. She smiled and nodded. I opened the message at 8:27 p.m. It wasn't sent to me. It was sent to my niece. Brenda's name at the top, no greeting. Your aunt's being dramatic. Don't let her throw away the condo over feelings. I read it once. Then again. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I just set the phone down and sat there feeling my jaw lock. If this was about family, why go around me? If I was being dramatic, why did they need someone else to steady me? Someone younger, easier to sway? Renee called a minute later. She shouldn't have done that, she said. That was all. No advice, no pressure. Just a line that landed clean. I hated that part of me that still wanted to explain. I hated that my first instinct was to soften it, to say it wasn't that bad. I hated the way I stayed quiet. I logged into the title portal and pulled up the condo record. The screen glowed back at me, all boxes and buttons, nothing emotional about it. I confirmed the transfer on death update and submitted the final change, so it took effect immediately. No ceremony, just a confirmation number and a short notice. Processed. If they were so sure I'd throw it away, why were they so worried? If it was just feelings, why did it require messages behind my back? I didn't throw anything away. I just stopped offering it to people who mocked the cost. I shut the laptop and leaned back my shoulders, aching like I'd been carrying something heavy all day. Maybe I had. I thought about all the times I'd paid for peace with silence, all the times I'd let things slide because it was easier. I felt embarrassed by how long it took me to draw a line. I went out later and bought a new coffee mug. Nothing fancy. Plain color. It felt good in my hand. I picked up a new coffee mug that night. Something simple. Something mine. I opened the Ring app at 4:52 p.m. and watched my son stand on the porch like he belonged there. He knocked once, then again harder. The camera caught the way he leaned back, waiting for the door I used to open without asking questions. A woman I didn't know answered. Late 30s hair, pulled back, keys in hand. "Can I help you?" she said. He stumbled through my name. She shook her head. "We just moved in," she said, and closed the door. I felt my shoulders drop. Not relief, something flatter. Final. If this was family, why did he show up without calling? If I owed him notice, why did no one think I deserved it when they skipped my promotion? The footage ended. I closed the app. I sat at the small table in my new place and opened my laptop. One email. To my niece. Subject line, final confirmation. I attached the legal copy and the confirmation notice. No explanation, no softening. Just the truth sent once. Renee texted a minute later. Got it, she wrote. That was all. I hated that my chest still felt tight. I hated that part of me expected an apology even now. I hated how long I'd trained myself to wait. I hated the way I stayed quiet. Have you ever been treated like the backup plan in a life you paid for? I didn't block anyone. I didn't send a final message. I didn't explain my reasons again. I'd already explained them for years. I picked up my coffee mug and held it with both hands. The warmth steadying me more than any speech ever had. She sips from her mug. The TV is off. The phone stays quiet.